Welcome back to the Daily Thunder podcast. I'm John Napier, publisher of Daily Thunder, and I'll be your host today. Alongside me is Daily Thunder beat writer Brandon Rahbar. Brandon, how are you this day before the trade deadline?
I am good, and a big trade just went down. Thunder rolling. They've made 2 trades. Move over, Luka and AD. Sam Presti is working the phones.
He is working the phones. Well, as always, we're going to break down the last 7 days of Thunder basketball. J-Dub is officially an all-star. The Thunder lose to the Warriors despite another 50-point banger for SGA. Aaron Wiggins has a career-high night with 41 points against the Kings. And breaking news, the Thunder made yet another deadline move, and maybe that's where we should start with the trade deadline and everything that's been happening around the NBA. The deadline, for those who don't live and breathe the Thunder like Brandon does, is tomorrow, Thursday, February 6th at 2 p.m. Central, but there have been some moves. And let's start with the Thunder, although maybe the bigger moves are non-Thunder related. The Thunder made a trade already where they did an interesting little pick swap where they swapped their 2029 second-round pick that they got from Phoenix for the Nuggets 2030 second-round pick. All of that came via Charlotte. What's your reaction to that move, Brandon?
I think it's just smart business. The Thunder had so many 2029 second-round picks. I believe they had 6 2029 second-round picks. So they just adjusted it. Now they only have 5. They only have 1/6 of the second round in 2029, shifted it over, and they have 4 2030 second-round picks now. So just a smart little deal of business. And, you know, they obviously have a really good relationship with the Charlotte Hornets. I think that's one of those deals. Sam called up like, hey, I know you're enjoying Trey Mann and Vasa Micic. How about you do me a solid? And they did that work. Also, a little bit more details on that. The Thunder had a 2030 second-round pick from Denver, but it was only if the first owed by the Nuggets didn't convey in 2029 or 2030. And then Charlotte had a 2030 second from Denver, but only if the 2029-2030 first from Denver to OKC did convey. So now they just kind of cleared that mess up to where they're both going to get a Denver second kind of no matter what happens. So just smart business, small little move.
Okay, well, I like that because it makes it much easier to explain the 2030 pick that the Thunder have now when you release some of those conditions or protections. Well, the big news dropped right before we started recording, as there is reporting that the Thunder made a trade for a backup big, Daniel Theis, from the New Orleans Pelicans. So the Thunder get Theis and a 2031 second-round pick. I don't know if it's been reported exactly what is outgoing for the Thunder, but the Thunder had space to absorb Theis. And then, you know, right here live, looking up the stats for Theis, he's appeared in 38 games this season. He's playing quite a few minutes. He started 9. He's averaging 16 minutes per game, but he doesn't exactly light up the stat sheet. But we talked on this podcast about the Thunder maybe looking for a backup big. Is that the move? Or is this hey, this was an opportunity to help the Pelicans get below the tax line? We picked up yet another second-round pick, this one in 2031, and Theis is probably not part of the long-term plans.
I'm not sure. I think it could go either way. It makes sense if the Thunder kept him on as a third kind of emergency big. Because like you said, we've talked about that. I said that, you know, if there's anything that the Thunder do along the fringes, if they don't go out and get a Cam Johnson, if they're just looking to kind of bolster the lineup, the rotation going into the playoffs, if they wanted like an emergency big or an emergency kind of table setter, playmaker off the bench, trader off the bench with the injuries to A.J. Mitchell and just having some insurance with the Chet and Hartenstein injuries this year, Daniel Theis makes some sense there. Like, yes, he hasn't been great this year, but historically he's been a solid backup center. Like, you know, for his career, he shoots about 33% from 3 with the Clippers last year on a much better team, mind you, than the Pelicans are this year. Like, it's hard to me to gauge somebody's numbers based on, you know, like an injured lottery team like the Pelicans. So looking at Daniel Theis last year with the Clippers, he played 59 games, shot 37% from 3, 6.3 points, 4.1 rebounds in 17 minutes. Like, as a third big, like, and especially until Chet comes back, if you want to play him over, say, J. Will or J. Will and Theis together, if you want to just add a little bit of size, you could do worse than Daniel Theis, especially when you get a draft pick just to take on his expiring minimum salary. So, but then same, the other side of that coin, I could also see them waiving him. Like, hey, let's just get the second round pick, waive him, and, give A.J. Mitchell the contract, maybe sign Carlson, maybe put Carlson on a two-way. We'll see. The Thunder still have another 24 hours to go, so we'll see what happens. But I could see it being either one.
Yeah, I think that's the question, because now that Theis is coming in, that's a roster spot that potentially could have gone to A.J. Mitchell if they converted him to a guaranteed contract. Certainly this might spell the end of Brandon Carlson, unless they want to find a way to make that work somehow. So that's the open question. Like, where does Theis fit on this team going forward? Or is because he's on an expiring, that Thunder had the cap space to absorb him, he's likely to get waived or bought out? What are your predictions sitting here today?
My prediction is A.J. Mitchell is going to get a standard contract. I fully believe that. And so the Thunder still have something to do. Because now they have all roster spots filled. I really like the idea, honestly, of Theis as a third kind of break glass in case of emergency big. I feel like, though, he's going to be waived, or either that or moved in another deal. Because I just feel like, whether it's a consolidation trade or something, that something is going to be opened up to where they can give a spot to Mitchell and maybe make another move as well. So my prediction, 55% would be that he's waived or moved in another deal, and then 45% that they keep him and use him as their third center.
Well, we still have quite a bit of time until the deadline, and maybe by the time you're listening to this podcast, the landscape has changed and the Thunder have made another deal. But Brandon, do you think there are more deals to be made for the Thunder?
I don't know. I do. Here's why I think so. Because the A.J. Mitchell deal, I just can't see them going the rest of the season. All these guaranteed contracts, I just can't see them not giving A.J. Mitchell, with what he showed in his rookie year, I can't see them just keeping him on a two-way. I think he's going to get the contract, even with the injury that he had this year, unless there's some sort of kind of oral agreement and, down the road they do that, maybe in the offseason or something. But I just feel like AJ is going to get that contract. And if that happens, that means they have to do something else. So, yeah, I think that something else will be done. I don't think any major, swings are going to happen. If anything, I think it'll be a guy like a Daniel Theis coming off the bench and getting a guy like that.
So the Thunder don't have some secret Luka Doncic-like trade waiting in the wings. That seems very unlikely.
I mean, if Nico Harrison comes calling, you got to answer the phone right now. He's that's right. I mean, he's just handing out things right now. Well, let's move on and let's talk about that trade, because it does have implications for the Thunder and implications around the Western Conference. And I guess if you just came out of a cave somewhere, you're probably just now learning the biggest news, maybe in NBA trade history, where the Mavs and the Lakers facilitated a trade that sent Luka Doncic over to the Lakers, sent Anthony Davis to the Mavs, and the whole world just lost their minds, because Luka Doncic is on the upswing of his career and is probably one of the top 5 or 10 players in NBA. Anthony Davis still very talented, maybe on the downswing of his career, and maybe with some small pieces, it wasn't. The Lakers didn't give up much to get Doncic. So what are your thoughts on that trade? I just like everybody else, I didn't believe it was real at first. It didn't seem real. Luka is a top, at worst, 4 player in the world right now, and he's 25 years old. He's a guy that should be off limits in any trade discussion. It's shocking. It is shocking. And honestly, my biggest takeaway is probably, of course, it's the Lakers. Of course, the Lakers fall backwards into another superstar young talent. They were looking bleak. They didn't have any, great assets, any young players to build around. any stars to build around. LeBron is aging out. AD is getting older, and they just get handed a gift on a silver platter. Look, obviously AD is still a top 10 player, but he's aging, injury history. AD and one first rounder for Luka is absurd. The value is like if you're doing like a fantasy football trade and going to the the rankings as far as like values go, like it would be a deal that you would never do. Like commissioners would veto this. Like, I mean, if you're a fantasy football or fantasy basketball commissioner, you would veto it. Like, you just don't do it. It's crazy. I still think the Mavs are going to be good this year, by the way. They're still going to be a really good team. If they can make the play-in, if they get things together, they would be a tough team to face for any of those top 4 teams in the first round. But giving up Luka is just nuts.
Yeah, the value that the Mavs got back is insane, especially when you compare. As a Thunder fan, I compare the value that the Thunder got for Paul George, and one of those players is a top 5 in the world player in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, along with 75 different draft picks that came along with it. It is mind-boggling, and of course, I've seen Luka just catch so many strays about his conditioning, his weight, his injury history to try to explain why the Mavs might have made this move, and I'm not sure you can ever sort of justify the move that they made versus the value they got back. But candidly, I agree with you that pairing Anthony Davis alongside Kyrie and the Mavs, like they're going to be a good team still this year.
Yeah, this year they still. The wild thing is, they already had 2 really good bigs in Lively and Gafford, so AD seems a little bit redundant, but he's such a special player, and he has the kind of offense that those 2 guys don't have, and now they can get really big. And, you still have Kyrie, AD, MJ Washington, Klay Thompson, on the nights where he's lighting it up. It's hit or miss nowadays, but he can still light it up some nights. No team is going to want to face them in the first round. Like, if they get into the playoffs, they will be a tough out. And, they're still not as good this year because of what Luka brings and how dynamic he is, and this team was built around them, and he makes those bigs better. But that's still a really good team. I think long term, that's where it gets really, really crazy. Like, the trade gets nuts when you look at the long term implications. But just for this single season and maybe even next season, the Mavs are still going to be really good.
Well, also of note with this trade, Oklahoma City owns, I think, a 2028 pick swap with Dallas. So in the short term, Dallas might be better, but you really have to question what they're going to look like in 2028. And did that pick swap just become insanely more valuable?
I really have to question if Sam Presti has a crystal ball and how he knew that he wanted that 2028 pick swap, because the Thunder gave up a real first rounder to do that. Now, it was the least valuable of their first rounders last year, and the value on it now is great. Like, to give up a late first rounder, which, by the way, they got back anyways with 5 second rounders to go get Dylan Jones. But when you give up basically the 26th pick for what looks like a really, really juicy 2028 unprotected swap, like, who knows? Kyrie and AD are going to be 35 and 36 in 2028. Will those guys even still be on the team? What is going to be happening? Well, Nico Harrison will be around. He says he's probably not going to be. He's looking at 3 or 4 years, he says, as far as the long term. And then after that, he says that, he's going to be buried. So for the Thunder, that 2028 swap could be really, really nice. And to just give up a 26 pick in a weak draft to get it, that is some really, really nice value.
Yeah, Presti must have a crystal ball. Going to start coming to him and asking for some lottery numbers. Now, the other trade that impacts the Western Conference is De'Aaron Fox was traded to the Spurs. So when you couple that trade where the Spurs added a piece that probably makes them, more in contention for a play-in or playoff spot, along with the move that Dallas and the Los Angeles Lakers made, how do you think the landscape in the Western Conference has changed?
Look, I mean, I don't think anybody would want to face Wemby and De'Aaron Fox if they were able to get into the play-in and if they were able to climb out of the play-in and into the playoffs, just because, Wemby, any given, 7-game sample size could be he's a huge X factor. Like, he could still be the best player in any series. Obviously De'Aaron Fox is a really good player, one-time All-Star. I think it's a good pairing. I think ultimately, like, if the Thunder were to face the Spurs in the first round, they'd take care of business. But, they can be a scary matchup in the right matchup. I do think, though, that whoever the Thunder face in the first round, it's going to be kind of a rotten reward for being the 1 seed and getting possibly 65 wins. Like, you're looking at maybe Kyrie and AD, maybe Wemby and De'Aaron Fox, maybe KD and Steph Curry if he ends up going to the Warriors. So it's a stacked West, and when you get a stacked West, all 8 teams that make the playoffs are going to be good teams. There's going to be some good teams left out of the playoffs. I mean, likely Wemby and Fox don't make the playoffs this year, but I do think it's a good pairing going forward, and maybe they get at least some play-in experience for Wemby, which is, like a playoff-type setting. We saw that with the Young Thunder a couple years ago, and then gave them the momentum going into the next season. So I would assume that's what's going to happen with Wemby and Fox this season.
In addition to the wild Doncic AD trade, there have been some interesting rumors that are out there about Kevin Durant. We already talked about some of the jokes about Kevin Durant coming to the Thunder because of what Paul Pierce said, but there seems to be some real evidence that Durant may be on the move away from Phoenix. I saw some reporting today that the Heat, Suns, and Warriors are discussing a potential trade involving Kevin Durant and Jimmy Butler. What do you think about those rumors, and does that mean that maybe the Suns are giving up on this season?
It's tough. I think the Suns are just in a tough spot because of that Bradley Beal no trade clause that he has. And so the idea was, trade away Beal and get Butler, then you team up KD, Butler, and Booker, and that's a pretty tough team. If he's not going to waive that no trade clause, which, all power to Bradley Beal. Why, uproot you and your family's life just to appease Jimmy Butler? I get it from his perspective, but it's kind of holding up talks. And so I guess they're looking at pivoting because they realize they're not going to compete with the team that they have right now, right? So I guess the idea would be okay, well, we could still get Butler and still maybe make some noise, but we'll also get, maybe a Jonathan Kuminga and a bunch of draft picks. So at least they get something for the future while trying to pseudo compete now is what I guess their pivot is going to look like if they end up dealing away KD.
How do you think that would impact the landscape in the Western Conference if that trade went down?
KD to the Warriors and Butler to the Suns?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that the Suns would end up being downgraded, and right now they're already a play-in team. Given the right 1 or 2 game sample size, they could still make the playoffs, but they're not a team I think that you'd need to worry about, especially with their depth issues and their center issues. As far as the Warriors go, though, no team is going to want to face KD and Curry in the first round. I would obviously favor the Thunder and the Nuggets over that team, but outside of that, maybe the Grizzlies, maybe this new Lakers squad, but they would have to gut a lot of their team to make it happen. They'd have to give up Andrew Wiggins, probably Jonathan Kuminga, maybe Pods. So you're gutting, and maybe even Draymond Green, based on the rumors, which would be wild and kind of funny to see happen. KD getting traded for Draymond because he doesn't want to play with Draymond. I think that ultimately, no matter what moves happen, unless you see KD to a true contender, I think the Thunder Nuggets are kind of the class of the West, and then maybe if Luka and LeBron can figure things out and they get a center, maybe they can make a run. And I think that's kind of it. Those are, to me, the true contenders, unless something crazy happens over the next 24 hours.
Which could happen. This has been already one of the craziest trade seasons in NBA history, if not the craziest, simply because of the Doncic trade. But let's go back and let's talk about some of the Thunder games this last week. And we'll start with the game against the Warriors. We just talked about the Warriors being in trade talks. This was a game, to me, that I feel like the Thunder should have won early. They sure looked like they were going to run away with it. They were shutting Curry down. They had a big lead after the first quarter. SGA was on one, and yet they lost. And a lot of it seemed to be that there were only a few players on the Thunder who showed up in San Francisco. SGA had 52, Jalen Williams had 26, Joe had 17. The rest of the starters combined for just 10 points, and all of them shot poorly. Hartenstein shot poorly, 2 of 10. Dort shot poorly, 2 of 8. Wallace, 1 of 5. This just amounted to the fourth loss where one of Hart or Chet was in the lineup, and maybe one of Hart's worst games this season. So a lot went wrong against the Warriors. What do you think was the biggest issue?
I think it was just that. It was just the shooting outside of SGA, J-Dub, and Joe. I mean, those three guys, like you said, 52, 26, and 17 from those guys. The next leading scorer was 4 points from Hartenstein and from Dort. And outside of SGA, J-Dub, and Isaiah Joe, the Thunder shot 0 of 17 from 3. I mean, that's rough. That's really, really rough. And that's some crazy shooting variance, especially since we've seen guys like Dort shoot so well this season. And I mean, Aaron Wiggins was 0 for 4 from 3. Like, it was just such a wild shooting variance night. I mean, if you were to tell anybody that SGA was going to score 52 and Steph was going to score 21 on 6 of 15 shooting, you'd be like, okay, so the Thunder won by 25, 30. So it was just a wild shooting variance night, and I would say it was not much more than that, quite honestly. And Andrew Wiggins went vintage Timberwolves Wiggins against the Thunder, scoring 27 on 10 of 17, including 5 of 8 from 3. Like the shooting variance was just kind of wild on the night, I thought. And you know, the Warriors played hard, the effort was there, and the Thunder got off to that lead, and then just kind of, I think, took the foot off the gas, and the Thunder just – I think that this was the first game that the Thunder lost that they should have won. Like all the other losses, I'm like, okay, they didn't have it big, or, you know, it was a tough road game against the Nuggets or the Rockets, or like Fred VanVleet went off for 38 points, and you just kind of like shrug your shoulders. This was the first game all season long that the Thunder lost that I thought they really should have won.
Yeah, and I agree with that.
And it's a good thing if you can point to one game.
Yeah. And there are so many games where they let an inferior team hang around. Maybe they get behind, and I've always felt like the Thunder, okay, well, they'll make that push. They'll come back and they'll win. I felt that the entire time this game, and it just never happened. It was almost shocking, but you can't expect that every single time. You're going to have an off night, and you're going to drop one maybe you should have won, and this is probably the one time it happened for the Thunder this season.
Yeah, and I wouldn't look any more past that. Like, you know, most teams have several of these throughout the season, even contenders. So I would just shrug it off. Bad shooting variance, and you just lost one that you should have won, and that's one of 82.
Well, they sure came back with a vengeance against the Kings, and in particular, you went from one Wiggins having a great game to a Wiggins who had an even better game. Aaron Wiggins had a career night, 41 points, 14 rebounds, 3 assists. He had a team-high 40 minutes. He was sitting at 39 in the fourth quarter. He really wanted to get that 40th point. They got 37, shot a bunch of threes trying to get that 40-point game. Got a layup, got to 39, but he was going to get 40 that night. That was a lot of fun to watch. It was a great way to knock out what happened against the Warriors out of memory. And maybe the big thing for me is just how much the team was into what Wiggins was doing. So break that one down for us, Brandon. How about Wiggins' career night?
Yeah, that was so much fun to watch. Like, seeing him go for it. Like, usually this Thunder team, you know, it's not about, you know, personal stats. They will pull, you know, Shea could have 40 points after 3 quarters, but if they're up by 20, he's not playing the fourth quarter, even if he could gun for a career high or gun for 50 points. So this was the first time, and Mark Daigneault actually addressed it, and he was right in the postgame, like, hey, The reason he kept playing was because we were short on players and we needed to play somebody, which is true. But Wiggins was going for it. And I thought it was fun. It was fun to see him actually go for it. Like, he had that 27, and it's like, ooh, Wiggins is going to get a 30-piece. This is fun, career high. He gets to 30, and then all of a sudden he went from 27 to like 35 in just like a minute. Like, he just hit a few shots in a row, and it's like, is he going to get 40? And it was fun because the Kings did not want him to get 40, and they started like doubling him. They started trapping him up top, and the Thunder were finding ways for him to get shots. It was fun to see, but the most fun, like you said, was seeing the Thunder bench, like SGA, J-Dub, Chet, all up on their feet, cheering every single time he attempted a shot, and seeing the Thunder crowd. This was a 40-point blowout at one point, and everyone in Loud City stuck around to watch the Aaron Wiggins show. And like every basket he hit, you would think that this was like a meaningful basket in a close game. That's how excited everybody was to see Wiggins go for 40.
And this was the night for, the supporting cast. Hartenstein had a great game. He had 16 points, 15 rebounds. Dort was back to his good three-point shooting. He had 20 points. Kenny Hustle had 18 points and 11 rebounds. But yeah, the star of the show was Aaron Wiggins. And how many teams have basically a bench player, I think, although I think Wiggins started was due to the injuries, who can come off the bench and put up 41 points. So we've seen bench players come on against the Thunder and they'll score 25, 27, and it blows your mind. But a guy who comes in and scores 41, what a luxury.
Yeah, it really is. And that's the thing. When Wiggins and Joe signed those contracts in the offseason, everyone knew that they were valuable role players, and those were really good deals. And the Thunder just had this depth, and you don't usually get to see a guy like Wiggins, go for 40 points. But you do wonder if he was on like a lottery team, if he was on a Wizards, if he was on a Pelicans that's injured, if he was on the Hornets, and he was able to get, 20 shots a game, like what could Wiggins average if he was a team's, second, third option? So it's fun to see what Wiggins can do in that sort of role.
Well, the next game for the Thunder was a 125-96 win over the Bucks, who were basically playing with their G League team. They didn't have Giannis. They didn't have Chris Middleton, who just got traded for Kyle Kuzma. They didn't have Dame. They didn't have Brook Lopez. They didn't have Bobby Portis. And Shea barely had to play. He played 22 minutes, although he was scoring at will. And I guess if he really wanted to, he probably could have scored 50 points if he took every shot. But you had another good night for the supporting cast. Jang had his best game of the season, arguably, at 21 points and 8 rebounds. Joe continued to stay hot shooting. He's now up to 49% from 3 if you just count the games in 2025. Not a lot to talk about in this game because the competition wasn't great. But maybe mention one thing about that Bucks game, Brandon.
One thing about that Bucks game was that it was a game played in the NBA by two teams. It was look, SGA could have gone for 50 points. That was kind of my takeaway. He could have gone for 50 points for the third time in less than 2 weeks if he wanted to. He got pulled out so early. He got pulled out halfway through the third quarter and didn't get to play again and already had 34. He could have easily gone for 16 more points. It was a layup line for him. He was just scoring at will and could have done anything he wanted to. So, yeah, but, John Hamm called it the Sippy Cup, because it was the NBA Cup Finals rematch, and he called it the Sippy Cup, which I thought was really funny.
Well, I guess if there's any other takeaway, it's that Adam Flagler got a bucket. Took 11 tries, but he got himself a bucket.
And the crowd went nuts, by the way. They were shout out to Loud City. They have stayed engaged through all these fourth quarter blowouts. They have stayed in their seats. They haven't left early just because it was a blowout, and they are, cheering for these guys, these third string players. And Flagler, when he finally hit that shot, they went nuts. It was fun.
Well, let's look ahead to the next few games here with the time we have left. Just briefly, tonight the Thunder play the Suns. Kevin Durant is doubtful, and I'm going to use air quotes on doubtful with his name being in trade rumors. Anything? This one's going to be on national television, but is this actually going to be something we're tuning into?
Yeah, I mean, the Suns still have Booker and Beal. Obviously, Katie's not playing. That loses a lot of the luster, but it's not like the Bucks where they didn't have any stars out there. At least they'll have a couple big names. So, national TV, ESPN is always fun. I think Shea's going to put on a show tonight because who on the Suns is going to stop him? Ryan Dunn's a nice defender as a rookie. He's been good. They don't have any rim protection right now. So I think Shea is just going to get to the rim at will like he did against the Bucks.
Well, Friday, the Thunder host the Raptors. The Raptors right now are red hot. They have 8 wins in their last 11, including victories over the Warriors, Celtics, Magic, a couple of wins over the Hawks and the Clippers. This one might be harder than maybe it looked a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see if they make any more deadline moves. There's actually some rumors that they're going to trade from Brandon Ingram, which could be interesting. They've got some players that could be X factors that can make the game interesting. I think the Thunder ultimately win this, especially since it's at home. But the Raptors have been, feisty, much feistier than people expected.
And the Grizzlies have been hot lately. They are 9-1 over the last 10. They've won 3 in a row. This is a very different team than the Thunder faced when they walloped them in December. This might be a little bit of a measuring stick game for the Thunder.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a great measuring stick game for the Thunder because the Grizzlies have been so hot and because they are now the number 2 seed in the West. The Rockets are on a skid right now. And so I think the Grizzlies could ultimately be the 2 seed in the West. I think the Nuggets are going to keep climbing, but there's a decent cushion between 2 and the Nuggets right now at 4. So this is going to be a fun game, and it's the second night of a back-to-back. It's going to be on the road for the Thunder, so it's a tough one. And Verno is going to have a lot of things to say about this game, one way or another, win or lose.
Well, what a week of Thunder basketball and some pretty exciting times in the NBA over at least the next 24 hours as the trade deadline looms, but still some games to look forward to, and of course that marquee game against the Grizzlies this week. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in to the Daily Thunder podcast. I'm John Napier, host of the podcast, and he's Brandon Rahbar, Daily Thunder beat writer. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to the Daily Thunder podcast on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you like what you're hearing, please do us a favor and leave us a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back in your feed soon.